How are you still so normal? Naomi asked me once as we were folding laundry in our tiny dorm room, her head tilted, genuinely curious. What do you mean? I smiled, half knowing where this was going. She shrugged. I mean, after the way your family treats you? If it were me, I'd have snapped a long time ago. I just laughed. But the truth, I had snapped, quietly, inwardly, years ago. Growing up in the Rowe family felt like standing in someone else's spotlight, except that someone was my older brother, Caleb. If Caleb got a B, it was great effort under pressure. If I got an A, it was why not an A+. He was the golden child, the miracle, the one my parents believed would change the world. And me, I was the filler, the background noise. When Caleb turned 16, they surprised him with a brand new sedan, silver and shiny, with custom plates. 2 years later, on my 16th birthday, I got a dusty bicycle from a garage sale. The chain squeaked, the seat was torn, and the brakes barely worked. I still smiled and said thank you. I even meant it, sort of. Because deep down, I wasn't surprised. I'd already learned by then that expectations were a luxury I couldn't afford. My parents, Martin and Lillian, never hid their favouritism. They didn't have to. It was baked into everything. When Caleb won a math competition, they framed the certificate and emailed it to every relative. When I won a regional writing contest, they forgot to pick me up from the ceremony. Literally. I waited outside the school auditorium for over 2 hours until a janitor called me a cab. It sounds dramatic, like the start of one of those over-the-top revenge stories you see online, but for me it wasn't about revenge. Not yet, it was just life. Normal. Lonely, sure. But normal. The only person who ever made me feel seen was my grandma, Doris. She remembered every birthday, slipped me 20s in the kitchen when no one was looking, called me her thoughtful girl, and actually meant it. At 14, I told her I wanted to study psychology someday. She didn't laugh. She didn't suggest I aim lower like my dad did. She said, when the time comes, I'll help. No child of mine should have to fight alone to learn. Those words stayed with me. They carried me through late-night study sessions and early morning part-time jobs. They were the reason I pushed through high school, applied to colleges in other cities, and finally got into Western University with a partial scholarship. When I got my acceptance letter, I cried, not because I was scared or excited, but because I finally thought I'd earned something no one could take away from me, and most of all, because I believed Grandma's promise. I thought, it won't be easy, but I won't be alone. She'll help. I moved out 2 weeks before the semester started. My parents didn't help pack. Dad said, it's just college, not the moon. Mum added, you'll figure it out, you always do. No hugs, no we're proud of you. Just a bag of stale granola bars and some hand-me-down bedsheets. Still, I was hopeful. Naive, maybe. I texted Grandma my bank details as soon as I settled into the dorms. She responded with a heart emoji and said, give me a day or two, sweetheart. I waited. A day, then 3, then a week, then a month. Nothing came. At first I thought maybe she forgot. Then I thought maybe something happened to her. Finally, I called my mum. She sighed so loud I flinched. For God's sake, Elena, can you stop acting like a victim? Grandma's got her own problems. She's barely keeping up with Caleb's tuition. What? I blinked. But she said she'd help me. She promised. Mum's voice turned sharp. You sound selfish. Honestly, you should be ashamed. You want help? Get a job. And I did. That day, I printed out 5 resumes, walked the entire block around campus, and landed a shift at a local bakery. 6 a.m. openers and late-night cleaning shifts. I cleaned trays, while Caleb, supposedly drowning in finals, was nowhere to be seen. I skipped meals so I could buy textbooks, bought expired groceries on discount, used the library Wi-Fi to save on data. Still, I told myself, it'll get better. Maybe Mum was right. Maybe Grandma is struggling. The guilt ate at me. The shame was real. I stopped calling. I stopped texting. And somewhere in that silence, I convinced myself that maybe Grandma had simply forgotten. That was the worst part. Not the hunger, not the aching feet after double shifts, not even the cold, resentful phone calls from my parents. It was believing for a while that the one person who saw me had stopped seeing me too. That's when I started to disappear from them, from myself. But what I didn't know was that silence wasn't from forgetfulness, it was theft. And when the truth finally came out, it would explode like a grenade at a family dinner. And for once, the quiet girl no one looked at would be the one everyone stared at. I got the bakery job the same week I stopped believing anyone in my family would ever show up for me. It wasn't glamorous, 6 a.m. shifts, cleaning muffin trays, dodging a cranky manager who treated everyone like they were disposable. But they let me eat leftover pastries if no customers came before close. That was something. After classes, I'd nap on the library couch before clocking in for my second job, freelance content writing. It paid peanuts, but it covered basic toiletries and a little Wi-Fi money. I tried to stretch every dollar. Sometimes that meant eating buttered toast 3 meals in a row. Sometimes it meant quietly peeling stickers off expired meat, just to feel less ashamed when checking out. My roommate, Naomi, started noticing. One night, my stomach growled so loud it woke her up. She didn't say anything then, but the next day she came home with grocery bags and said, "I bought too much. Help me eat it, please." I wanted to cry. Instead, I forced a laugh and said, "Guess I'll take one for the team." She wasn't fooled. Then my laptop died, just blacked out mid-assignment. I tried restarting it. Nothing. Took it to the repair shop, $320 minimum, maybe more. I sat outside the store for 20 minutes, staring at my phone, then back at the sidewalk. Eventually, I walked back to campus and cried in the bathroom stall until I couldn't breathe. Naomi found me that evening, eyes red and still shaking. She didn't ask. She just said, "Give me your specs. I'll talk to my parents." 2 days later, she handed me $500 in an envelope and said, "It's a loan. Write it down. Pay me when you can." I did. Every penny went into a little blue notebook. I swore to pay her back. Meanwhile, my parents kept sending family group texts about Caleb's big semester. How he was excelling, how his professors were so impressed with his mathematical potential. I hadn't heard Caleb's voice in months. The last time he texted me, it was a thumbs up emoji. I wasn't even sure what it was in response to. I didn't ask questions. I was too busy surviving. Then came the worst moment. A letter from the bank arrived in my mailbox. It was addressed to me, but inside was a notice about a credit card opened under my name with over $5,200 in charges. I had never applied for a card. Never even thought about it. I called the number. They verified the address. My parents' house, the one I grew up in. I called my mom. She picked up on the second ring and sounded annoyed from the get-go. "Now what?" she asked, like I was a bill collector. "I just got something from a bank," I said slowly. "There's a card under my name with charges. She cut me off. "Don't start this drama, Elena. You probably signed something without reading. Kids your age never pay attention." "But I didn't apply for this." "Oh, come on, always playing the victim. Grow up." My chest tightened. I couldn't breathe. "Did you use my name?" A pause. Then, "You're being ridiculous." I whispered, "That's identity theft." Her voice sharpened. "Don't use words you don't understand. Do you have any idea how hard things have been for us lately? Caleb's had setbacks. We're trying to keep him on track. You think college is easy for him?" I went silent, and she took that as a cue to escalate. "You're so dramatic. Always have been. Always expecting something. Maybe if you didn't act like such a burden all the time, things would be different." I didn't answer. I couldn't. But let me pause right here and ask, have you ever had someone twist the truth so hard that it made you question your own memory? Have you ever been blamed for something they did, then made to feel like you were the one in the wrong? Tell me in the comments, because maybe I'm not the only one who's had their own mother make them feel invisible and guilty in the same breath. That night, I didn't eat. Not because there wasn't food, but because I couldn't swallow. Something in me cracked. I didn't have the energy to argue or defend myself anymore. I just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was ever going to feel safe again. By the end of that semester, I had dropped 8 pounds. The manager at the bakery said, "You okay, kid? You're looking kinda grey." I laughed. "That's just finals." It wasn't. It was stress, hunger, shame. I thought about asking Grandma for help again. I drafted an email, but when I checked my inbox, the last message I remembered her sending, where she asked for my account info, was gone. Vanished. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe she never meant to help me in the first place. I clicked new message, stared at the blinking cursor, then closed the tab. Maybe I really was too much, too needy, too forgettable. But what I didn't know, what none of us knew, was that a storm was building. And when it finally broke, it would tear open every lie, every cover-up, every sweet-sounding excuse my family ever fed me. The night of Grandma Doris's birthday, I came home with more nerves than excitement. I had $6.23 left in my bank account after buying her a gift, a framed photo of us from my high school graduation, one of the few times I saw her beam with real pride. I wrapped it myself in leftover bakery paper and hoped she wouldn't mind. By the time I got to her house, the place was full. Voices bouncing off walls, kids chasing dogs, wine glasses clinking. The smell of roasted chicken and buttered cornbread filled the air, and it hit me harder than I expected. I hadn't smelled food like that in months. "Look who's here," Aunt Maggie called out. "Elena, come in, sweetheart." My mum gave me a half hug without really looking at me. My dad just nodded. Caleb, of course, wasn't there. "Midterms," they said quickly when I asked. "He's just so dedicated." I smiled, not trusting myself to respond. Every time they mentioned his studies, something in my stomach twisted. I wanted to believe it, but something always felt off. Dinner started with the usual toasts. Everyone took turns praising Grandma, her kindness, her generosity, her wisdom. I sat quietly, scooping mashed potatoes onto my plate, trying to eat slowly so I wouldn't draw attention to the way I was devouring everything like I hadn't had a proper meal in weeks. At one point, my cousin Jenna leaned over and whispered, "You okay? You've gotten so thin." Before I could say anything, my mum, across the table, cut in. "Oh, she's probably doing one of those trendy fasting things. College girls and their TikTok diets." Everyone chuckled. I didn't. I just stared at my fork. But then Grandma looked up from her seat at the head of the table. Her smile faded. She tilted her head and studied me for a long second. "Elena," she said slowly, her voice clear, "isn't the $1,500 I send you each month enough for food?" The room went silent. My fork clattered onto my plate. Everyone turned to look at me. I swallowed. "What money?" Grandma blinked. "The money I've been transferring every month since you started college." "I never got it." She turned to my parents, her face unreadable. "Martin, Lillian, is there something you want to tell us?" Mum's face drained of colour. Dad froze, still chewing, pretending not to hear. "Mother," Mum said quickly, "this isn't really dinner conversation. Maybe we can—" "No," Grandma cut her off. Her voice was steel. "You either tell the truth now, in front of everyone, or I'm calling my attorney." Mum burst into tears. Dad stared at his hands. We used it for Caleb." Gasps echoed around the table. Someone dropped a spoon. My cousin Tyler's mouth fell open. Grandma didn't blink. Explain. He got in with the wrong people, Dad said. We tried therapists, rehab, but he kept relapsing. He owes a lot of money, Doris. We were desperate. You were sending so much. We thought we could help him without worrying you. So you stole from Elena? Grandma asked, deadly quiet. From my granddaughter who's been working 2 jobs and losing weight because she can't afford groceries? It wasn't like that, Mom tried. She's young, resilient. She'll bounce back. That's when I stood up. You erased me, I said. My voice shook, but I didn't care. You made me think Grandma forgot me. You made her think I was okay. My eyes welled up, but I didn't blink. I skipped meals. I cleaned toilets at 6 a.m. while you told people Caleb was studying for finals. And then I remembered the email, the one Grandma sent me months ago asking for my bank details. I went into my inbox that night, after the tears. It had been gone, deleted. I looked at Mom now. You accessed my email, didn't you? She didn't deny it. I gave you $100,000 for her tuition, Grandma said, turning toward them, shaking now, not with fear, but fury. You told me she got no scholarship. You took that money and only paid the school $40,000. Where's the rest? Dad mumbled something about debt and keeping Caleb safe. And the videos, I asked. The Zoom recordings you sent Grandma of him in class. Those were fake, weren't they? No answer. My aunt stood up. You sent us those too, said he made the dean's list. Dean of what? Grandma snapped. Poker nights? No one laughed. I looked around the table and realized they weren't looking at me like I was dramatic or oversensitive. They were looking at me like I'd just come back from the dead, like they were seeing me clearly for the first time. Grandma stood. Everyone enjoy dessert. Martin, Lillian, my office, now. They followed her like scolded children, doors shut, silence returned. I stayed seated, numb, my food cold. My cousin Tyler patted my arm. You good? I nodded, even though I wasn't. I stared down at the table, hearing only muffled voices from behind Grandma's office door. At some point, my parents left without saying goodbye. Grandma came out moments later with a faint smile. Cake, anyone? She said. No one moved. No one. When the guests finally cleared out, she pulled me aside. You're not going home tonight, she said softly. Stay here. Tomorrow we talk. I nodded. I was too tired to speak. But in that moment, for the first time in years, I felt something new blooming beneath the exhaustion. It wasn't peace. Not yet. It was the beginning of being believed. The morning after the dinner, I woke up in Grandma Doris's guest room to the smell of coffee and cinnamon toast. For a second, I forgot everything that had happened the night before. Then I remembered Caleb, the missing money, the fake emails, my mother's silence, my father's shame, and my chest tightened like someone was sitting on it. When I walked into the kitchen, Grandma was already there, 2 mugs on the table. She looked tired, but calm. Sit, sweetheart, she said softly. We need to talk. I sat. She slid a cup toward me. Drink, then listen. For the next 20 minutes, she laid it all out. She had never transferred money to me directly. I gave it to your parents, she said, every single time. $1,500 a month, $100,000 for tuition, another $80,000 emergency fund for Caleb. All routed through my parents, because she trusted them. I didn't want to deal with online banking, she admitted. I thought it'd be easier for everyone. But you emailed me, I said quietly, about the transfers. I did. When you didn't reply, I asked your mother if something happened. She told me you were just busy, focused on school, that I shouldn't worry. I looked down, my hands were shaking. They deleted the email. Her lips pressed tight. That's what I figured. When I asked her again last week about how you were doing, she said Elena's thriving. She doesn't even need the money anymore. I nearly laughed. I was working 2 jobs, I said. I went to bed hungry. My roommate had to loan me money to fix my laptop. But yeah, thriving. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Grandma said, "They also told me you'd gotten a full scholarship, that I didn't need to send anything more." "But I only got partial aid," I replied. "They paid the school $40,000. That's what shows on my student portal." She blinked. "They told me it was the full 100. And just like that, another piece clicked into place. "They pocketed the rest," I whispered. "Looks that way," she said. Then came the part that hurt the most. "Caleb," she said, "never went to college." I froze. "They sent him to Riverdale, a residential rehab center. Said it would be better than jail. Said it was the only shot at saving him." I tried to breathe through the pounding in my ears. "But every time you asked about him..." Grandma paused. "They lied, told you he was on campus, sent me fake Zoom recordings of him in lecture halls. God knows who they paid to make those." I felt dizzy. All the texts from Mum bragging about Caleb's GPA, all the guilt I felt for not being more like him, all the late nights crying because I thought I was the failure. None of it was real. "You were never the problem," Grandma said, like she could read my thoughts. I looked up, and she reached across the table and held my hand. "I should have checked on you directly. That's my failure." "No," I said, voice cracking. "They played you, just like they played me." Grandma took a breath. "That's why I've changed everything." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She stood, walked to her desk, and pulled out a thick manila envelope. "I met with my lawyer this week," she said. "The will's been rewritten. You are now the sole heir to my estate." I blinked. "Wait, what?" "They've already taken over $250,000 from me, lied to my face, hid your suffering. That's their share." "But I don't..." I started. She held up a hand. "This isn't about what you need. It's about what's right." I didn't know what to say. For so long I'd been ignored, overlooked, used. Now suddenly I mattered? Grandma sat again. "They might come to you, Elena, try to manipulate you, guilt you, maybe even threaten you." I nodded slowly. "Let them try." For the next few days, I stayed with her. We talked about everything: school, my job, the future. She helped me open a personal checking account, transferred the next month's funds directly. I bought groceries without checking the price for the first time in a year. I paid Naomi back in full, plus interest, even though she laughed and refused it. I bought a used but functioning laptop and finally got to replace my $2 backpack with one that didn't rip when it rained. And one morning, as I was sipping coffee on the porch, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. "Elena?" a voice said. "It's Caleb." It happened the following weekend. Naomi and I were cleaning up our dorm, folding laundry and half watching a cooking competition on mute, when there was a knock at the door. Not a text, not a call, a knock. She peeked through the peephole and turned to me, eyes wide. "Your parents," she mouthed. I froze. The door opened before I could say anything. My dad stepped in first, trying to smile like this was some friendly catch-up. My mum followed, her face pale, makeup smudged. Her eyes darted around the room like she was looking for an escape hatch. Naomi grabbed her backpack. "I'll give you guys some space." She glanced at me like, "Are you sure you're okay?" I nodded, just once. Dad sat on the desk chair. Mum perched on Naomi's bed. "We need to talk," he said, clearing his throat. I stayed standing. "We heard from your grandmother," Mum started, "about the changes she made." I didn't answer. "She's upset," Dad added quickly. "She's acting rashly, but you know how she gets." No, I didn't. I'd just started really knowing Grandma, and everything I knew about her now, She didn't do rash, she did justice. You could talk to her, Mom continued, help her see reason. Reason? I said, my voice flat. You want me to help you reverse the will? Well, yes, Dad said, like it was obvious. We're still your parents. I let out a laugh, sharp and bitter. That didn't seem to matter when you were stealing money meant for me. Mum leaned forward. You don't understand what we've been through with Caleb. No, I snapped. I don't, because you never told me anything. You let me starve while telling the whole family he was acing calculus finals. It wasn't like that, Dad muttered. Really, I said, because it felt like that when I had to eat stale pastries for dinner, when I borrowed money from Naomi because my laptop died, when I thought Grandma just forgot me. Mum's eyes filled with tears, but I didn't soften. Caleb needed help, she whispered. And I didn't. The room went quiet. I crossed my arms, trying to keep the shake out of my voice. You had 2 kids, and you picked one. That's not fair, Dad said. We did what we had to do. No, you did what was easy. You took the money meant for me and threw it at Caleb's addiction like a Band-Aid. And you lied about it. To Grandma, to me, to everyone. Mum stood now, shaking. We were scared. You don't know what it's like, Eleanor. You don't know what it's like to watch your son spiral and feel powerless to stop it. I do, I said, my voice low, because I watched myself spiral, and no one stopped that. Dad rubbed his hands over his face. We're not asking for everything, just enough to help him get clean. He owes people, dangerous people. That's not my problem, I replied. You're being selfish, Mum said, stepping closer. We raised you. You raised me to believe I didn't matter, I snapped. That being invisible was normal, that needing help was shameful. Mum's hands trembled. We made mistakes. You didn't make mistakes, I corrected. You made choices. They didn't speak, just stared at me like they didn't recognize who I'd become. And maybe they didn't. Maybe they still saw me as the quiet, grateful daughter who'd never dare raise her voice, the one who'd eat last and never ask for more. But she was gone. I walked to the door and opened it wide. We're not done, Dad said, standing. You're still part of this family. I looked him in the eye. Family doesn't treat each other like this. Mum's lip trembled. He's your brother. A brother I don't even know anymore, I said. A brother you taught to treat consequences like suggestions. They hesitated. Mum looked like she wanted to say something else, but I didn't wait. Get out. They left, slowly, like people walking away from a house they once owned, now burned to the ground. When the door clicked shut, I didn't cry. I sat on my bed and stared at the wall, my heart pounding but steady. Then Naomi walked back in, took one look at me, and sat beside me without a word. Bad? She asked softly. Worse, I said. Did they even apologize? I shook my head. She whistled under her breath. They really don't get it. No, I said, and maybe they never will. Over the next few days, I felt lighter. I threw myself into schoolwork, kept my cafe job on weekends, not because I had to, but because I liked it. I stopped obsessing over every dollar spent. I started applying for internships, bought fresh groceries, slept without guilt. Every Sunday, Grandma called, not to pressure, not to pry, just to talk. And I found myself healing. Because being cut out of a family isn't always a tragedy. Sometimes it's the first breath of air after nearly drowning. The call from Caleb came 2 weeks later. I almost didn't answer. It showed up as an unknown number, and I had just gotten out of my psychology seminar, still half dreaming about the research assistantship I'd applied for. But something, curiosity, closure, made me swipe right. Hello? There was a pause. Then, Elena. I knew the voice instantly. It's me, he said. It's Caleb. I didn't respond. I'm calling from the rehab centre, he continued. Part of the recovery process is making amends. I sat on a bench outside the library, watching students walk past with headphones and iced coffee, talking about exams and weekend plans. I didn't know, he said. About the money, I mean, not all of it, but I knew they were hiding stuff. I wasn't in a good place. You're still not, I said quietly. He was silent for a second. Fair. I'm not asking you to forgive me, he added. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for my part in it. I know I didn't earn anything they gave me, and I know what it cost you. I closed my eyes. There was a time I would have given anything to hear him say that. But now, I didn't need it. I didn't need him. Thank you for saying that, I said. I hope rehab helps you. Another pause. Then, yeah, me too. We said goodbye. And that was it. The truth is, I didn't hate Caleb. He wasn't the architect of my pain, just the product of a family that refused to make space for more than one child at a time. He'd been handed everything. I'd been handed silence. And in the end, he never knew how to hold on to what he was given. But I did. I still do. The next few months passed like a slow unravelling of tension I hadn't even realised I was carrying. I got the research assistant position. My GPA jumped to a 3.9. I stopped checking my bank account before buying toothpaste. I made new friends, started eating better, slept deeper. And one Friday night, Naomi walked in waving a flyer. Spring break trip to Miami, she grinned. You in? I started to say no, instinctively, out of habit. But then I remembered. I didn't have to live like that anymore. Actually, I smiled, I'm in. Miami was sunshine, freedom, and laughter. I wore a dress that actually fit me. Ate whatever I wanted without doing math in my head first. Went parasailing, got sunburned, danced with strangers, laughed so hard I snorted iced tea out of my nose. For the first time in years, I felt like a person, not a burden, not the forgotten one, not Caleb's sister. Just me. When we got back to campus, there was a letter waiting in my mailbox. I recognised my mum's handwriting instantly. I almost threw it away, but I didn't. Inside was a short note. Elena, we've moved to a smaller place. Caleb's still in treatment. The doctors say he's doing better this time. Your father and I have been thinking about everything. We know we made mistakes. Big ones. We're proud of you for doing this on your own. Love, Mum. No apology. No real acknowledgement of the damage. Just words. I showed it to Naomi. She read it, raised one eyebrow and said, That's it? I tucked it in the back of my desk drawer. Not out of anger, just because I didn't need it. Finals came and went. I aced all of them. Grandma visited the day after my last exam. We went out to dinner, ordered dessert first, just because we could. She asked me, how are you really doing? I smiled. Better than I ever thought possible. On the way home, she told me something I'll never forget. You know, she said, when I was your age, I was the invisible one too. My sister got the looks, my brother got the brains, and I got told to keep the peace. She paused, then looked at me. But sometimes the ones who get overlooked the longest end up the strongest. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if my parents will ever apologise the way I needed. Or if Caleb will ever truly recover. I don't even know if I'll ever open that letter again. But I do know this. I am not what they did to me. I am what I built after. And if you've ever felt like the background character in your own family, if you've ever been the one no one checked on, the one they forgot to celebrate, the one who kept surviving quietly, you're not alone. Drop a I hear you in the comments if this hit close to home, or share your own story. I'll be reading. Because sometimes just knowing someone sees you, that's where the healing starts.